My kid accidentally said that my husband has been secretly remaking all my meals cause his mom thinks I can't cook. My 4-year-old just ended a 3-year Cold War between me and my mother-in-law with 7 words, and I'm not sure if I should ground him or buy him ice cream. Look, I didn't sign up to be the family diplomat when I married Justin 3 years ago. I thought I was getting a husband, not a full-time job managing his mother's feelings about my existence. Amelia Santos Chen is what happens when someone weaponizes hospitality. Retired home economics teacher, 62 years of traditional values, and the kind of woman who can insult you so politely that you'll thank her for it. She lives 20 minutes away, which might as well be next door, considering how often she materializes in my kitchen with that concerned expression, and a Tupperware container of just a little something to help out. During wedding planning, when I mentioned we'd ordered desserts from a local bakery, Amelia got this look. You know the one, like she'd just watched someone kick a puppy but was too polite to say anything. Store-bought desserts, she said, with the same tone you'd use for indoor plumbing optional. Then came the smile. That weaponized smile that meant she was about to say something that would make me question my life choices. How modern of you, sweetheart. Modern, like I'd suggested we serve the wedding cake on paper plates while wearing Crocs. I should have seen it coming, honestly. The woman taught home economics for 35 years. She has opinions about proper napkin folding and considers using jarred pasta sauce a moral failing. But I was young and optimistic and thought maybe we could bond over shared love for her son. I was adorably naive. The first Thanksgiving at our place was when I realized Amelia didn't just have opinions about cooking, she had a mission. I'd spent 2 days preparing what I thought was a decent meal. Nothing fancy, but everything homemade and planned out. I was actually proud of myself. Amelia walked into my kitchen and immediately started rearranging things. Not dramatically, just little adjustments that somehow made everything feel wrong. She moved my serving spoons to more logical locations, adjusted the oven temperature because turkey can be tricky, asked if I needed help with the gravy in that tone that suggested I definitely needed help with the gravy. Then she opened my refrigerator and started redistributing items for better organization. By the time Justin got home from picking up his brother, his mother had basically staged a hostile takeover of my kitchen while maintaining perfect plausible deniability. When Justin asked how everything was going, Amelia just smiled and said I was doing my best, with such genuine warmth that I felt crazy for being annoyed. That's Amelia's superpower, by the way. She can make you feel like you're overreacting to perfectly reasonable behavior while simultaneously making you doubt your competence as a human being. It's impressive, in a deeply disturbing way. Christmas dinner was worse. I'd made pot roast, nothing revolutionary, just following my mom's recipe that had never failed me before. But when Amelia took her first bite, she got this wistful look and started talking about how Justin had always loved her pot roast recipe, how she'd made it every Christmas when he was growing up, how some recipes just held special memories, didn't they? She managed to make my perfectly decent pot roast taste like failure in comparison to a dish I'd never even tried. Justin tried to smooth things over by complimenting both dishes, but I could see him making mental comparisons, probably wondering why mine didn't taste like childhood comfort food. I started second-guessing myself, wondering if maybe I really didn't know what I was doing in the kitchen. Amelia would mention cooking classes she'd seen advertised, always framed as something we could do together for fun. She'd share articles about basic cooking techniques on Facebook, tagging me with comments about how everyone can benefit from brushing up on the fundamentals. Amelia had a recipe for everything, and she shared them with the enthusiasm of someone doing you an enormous favor. Her famous lasagna recipe, her foolproof chicken marsala, her impossible-to-mess-up chocolate chip cookies that were apparently Justin's absolute favorites growing up. Each recipe came with detailed instructions and helpful tips, as if I'd never successfully fed myself before meeting her son. The subtext was clear: here's how you properly take care of my boy. When I got pregnant with Caddy, Amelia's helpful suggestions intensified. Suddenly, she had opinions about nutrition during pregnancy, recommendations for postpartum meal prep, and concerns about whether I was eating enough vegetables. She started bringing over nutritious meals during my first trimester morning sickness, which would have been thoughtful if they hadn't come with gentle lectures about the importance of proper nutrition for the baby. After Caddy was born, the kitchen interventions became more frequent. Amelia would volunteer to babysit, which was genuinely helpful, but I'd come home to find my spice rack reorganized and my pantry restocked with better quality versions of things I already owned. She'd leave helpful notes about proper food storage and gentle suggestions about introducing solid foods when the time came. I started feeling like a guest in my own kitchen. The real psychological warfare began when Caddy turned 2 and started eating regular food. Suddenly, Amelia had front row seats to my daily failures as a mother and cook, and she didn't waste the opportunity for educational moments. I didn't sign up to have my toddler's eating habits become a referendum on my worth as a human being, but Amelia had other plans. She'd arrive for babysitting armed with homemade snacks that Caddy would devour with enthusiasm, then spend the rest of the week rejecting my attempts at the same foods. Apparently, there's a specific technique for cutting apple slices that makes them more appealing to children, and I was doing it wrong. There's also a proper way to make grilled cheese that doesn't involve too much butter or uneven browning, both of which were apparently affecting Caddy's development of proper eating habits. Why am I always the one who has to defend my sandwich-making abilities to a woman who treats cooking like a competitive sport? Amelia would watch Caddy push around the food on her plate and make gentle observations about texture preferences and presentation techniques. She'd mention articles she'd read about childhood nutrition, always with that concerned grandmother expression that made me feel like I was slowly poisoning my own child through culinary incompetence. Justin started coming home with suggestions. Not demands, never demands, just helpful ideas he'd picked up from conversations with his mother. Maybe Caddy would eat more vegetables if they were prepared differently. Perhaps we should try introducing new foods more gradually. Had I considered that Caddy's pickiness might be related to inconsistent meal preparation? Amelia started bringing backup food to family gatherings. Not obviously, she's too socially sophisticated for that. She just happened to have prepared a little extra of something Caddy particularly enjoyed, in case the other food didn't agree with her. She'd casually mentioned that she'd made Justin's favorite dessert, just because she knew how much he missed it. I'd watch my daughter enthusiastically eat Amelia's contributions while barely touching what I'd made, and feel like I was failing at the most basic maternal function. Justin would praise his mother's thoughtfulness while politely eating my food, and I could practically hear him making mental notes about what Caddy actually preferred. Then Justin suggested I take cooking classes. Not maliciously. Justin doesn't have a malicious bone in his body, which is part of the problem. He suggested it with the genuine enthusiasm of someone who thought he was offering a solution to a problem I'd been struggling with. He'd found this great local cooking school that offered evening classes for busy parents. It would be fun, he said. A hobby we could share. Maybe Amelia could even babysit Caddy during the classes. I stared at him across our kitchen table, surrounded by the remnants of another dinner that had been perfectly adequate but apparently not memorable enough to inspire enthusiasm, and realized he actually thought I needed professional intervention to feed our family properly. His mother had successfully convinced him that I was culinarily deficient, and he was trying to fix me. The cooking classes became this thing that hung over our relationship like a storm cloud. Justin would mention them periodically, always framed as an opportunity rather than a necessity, but I could hear the underlying message. He wanted me to become someone who could cook the way his mother cooked, who could make the foods that meant comfort and home to him. I didn't take the classes. Instead, I started watching Caddy more carefully during family dinners. My 4-year-old daughter was developing the same critical eye that her grandmother had perfected. Caddy would compare my cooking to Amelia's with the brutal honesty that only children possess. She'd ask why my cookies didn't taste like Grandma's. She'd wonder aloud why Daddy seemed happier when we ate at Grandma's house. Caddy was learning to evaluate women based on their domestic performance, and I was apparently the cautionary tale. The Facebook posts started around Caddy's 3rd birthday. Nothing direct. Amelia is far too sophisticated for obvious passive aggression. Just thoughtful articles about the importance of family traditions and home-cooked meals. Photos of elaborate dinners she'd prepared, always with captions about the joy of nurturing family through food. Recipes shared with comments about how some things can't be learned from books. I'd see Justin liking these posts, sometimes even commenting with heart emojis or memories about growing up with her cooking, and I'd feel like I was watching my marriage slowly dissolve into a comparison I couldn't win. Why am I always the one who has to pretend this isn't happening, while everyone else gets to participate in my slow-motion humiliation? Then I got sick with food poisoning, ironic, considering my alleged cooking incompetence, and Amelia swooped in to help while I recovered. I spent 2 days in bed, grateful for the assistance, trusting that my family was being taken care of. When I finally emerged from my misery, I found my kitchen transformed. Amelia had deep cleaned everything, reorganized my pantry according to some system that made perfect sense to her and none to me, and restocked my refrigerator with prepared meals that would make recovery easier. She'd also taken the liberty of updating my spice collection, replacing several items with better quality versions, and adding things I'd never used but that were essential for proper cooking. My measuring cups had been replaced with a more accurate set. My cutting boards had been upgraded to more sanitary bamboo versions. I stood in my own kitchen, feeling like an intruder in someone else's domestic fantasy. Amelia had literally improved my cooking setup while I was unconscious, and somehow made it feel like a gift rather than an insult. Caddy bounced around the kitchen, excited about all the new stuff Grandma had brought, chattering about the special meals they'd prepared together while Mommy was sick. She kept comparing everything to how Grandma did it, using phrases that sounded suspiciously like direct quotes from Amelia's teaching moments. Justin seemed genuinely pleased with his mother's intervention. He thanked her repeatedly for taking such good care of our family, praised the meals she'd prepared, and mentioned how much easier it would be for me to cook properly with better tools. Better tools. Like my previous kitchen setup had been holding me back from achieving my culinary potential, and Amelia had generously removed those obstacles. I smiled and thanked her and felt something fundamental shift inside me. This wasn't help. This was a systematic campaign to prove that I was inadequate, wrapped in such perfect concern that questioning it made me look ungrateful. Caddy absorbed all of this. My daughter was learning that women who can't cook properly need to be fixed, managed, improved by other women who know better. She was developing expectations about domestic competence that I was apparently failing to meet. I wasn't just losing a battle with my mother-in-law, I was losing my daughter's respect, one imperfect meal at a time. The dinner party was Amelia's idea, naturally. She called it a celebration of Caddy's 4th birthday, though Caddy's actual birthday had been 2 weeks earlier, and we'd already had a perfectly adequate party at our house. I didn't realize I was under cooking stress, but Amelia has a gift for identifying problems I didn't know I had. The invitation came wrapped in such thoughtful concern that refusing would have made me look like an ungrateful monster. She'd handle everything, the menu, the decorations, the cleanup. All I had to do was show up and enjoy spending time with family. How could I say no to such generous hospitality? Easy. I should have said no, because Amelia's version of generous hospitality always comes with a performance evaluation hidden in the appetizer course. But I didn't say no, because I'm apparently a slow learner when it comes to recognizing psychological warfare disguised as family bonding. The menu Amelia planned was, of course, a greatest hits collection of Justin's childhood favorites: her famous lasagna that took 3 days to prepare properly, the chicken marsala that had been his favorite since he was Caddy's age, homemade bread rolls that required a specific technique she'd perfected over decades. She asked me to contribute something simple, maybe a salad or a side dish that wouldn't require too much preparation, something that would complement the meal without overwhelming it. She suggested her grandmother's coleslaw recipe if I felt up to trying something new, or perhaps just a bag of pre-mixed greens with store-bought dressing if I preferred to keep things easy. Pre-mixed greens, the culinary equivalent of being asked to bring paper plates to a potluck dinner. I spent 3 days preparing what I decided would be my masterpiece contribution to this family feast. Not a salad, a proper side dish that would hold its own against Amelia's carefully curated comfort food extravaganza. I researched recipes, bought expensive ingredients, and put together what I genuinely believed was a restaurant-quality roasted vegetable medley with herbs from my own garden. Why am I always the one who has to prove my worth through elaborate food preparation while everyone else gets to just exist without constant evaluation? The day of the dinner party, I arrived at Amelia's house with my beautiful vegetable dish and what I thought was justified confidence. The table was set like something from a magazine spread. Actual cloth napkins, multiple sets of silverware, flowers from Amelia's garden arranged in what was probably a family heirloom vase. Justin's brother Pete had driven up from San Diego with his new girlfriend, Jane. Justin's sister Lisa came with her husband and their twin boys. Even Justin's elderly Aunt Venetia had made the trip, complete with her famous potato salad that everyone would spend the evening praising with the enthusiasm usually reserved for life-saving medical procedures. I watched Amelia orchestrate the evening with the precision of a military commander. Every dish was perfectly timed, every course flowed seamlessly into the next, and every guest received exactly the right amount of attention to feel valued and welcomed. My roasted vegetables, which had looked gorgeous in my kitchen, seemed pathetic next to Amelia's elaborate spread. They weren't bad, they were actually quite good, but they were clearly the work of an amateur trying to compete in a professional league. Caddy spent the evening gravitating toward her grandmother's end of the table, chattering about all the special ingredients in each dish and asking detailed questions about cooking techniques that Amelia answered with the patience of someone who actually enjoyed explaining culinary mysteries to curious children. I sat there watching my daughter bond with her grandmother over shared appreciation for properly prepared food and felt like I was witnessing my own irrelevance in real time. The conversation during dinner was pleasant enough, family updates and gentle teasing and the kind of comfortable banter that comes from people who've known each other for decades, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was performing in a play where everyone else knew their lines and I was improvising badly. Amelia made sure to compliment my vegetables. They were very nice and beautifully presented, with the kind of polite enthusiasm you'd use to praise a child's finger painting. Justin echoed her praise, but I could hear the subtle note of relief in his voice, as if he'd been worried I might somehow embarrass the family with my contribution. Why am I always the one who has to be grateful for faint praise, while everyone else gets genuine enthusiasm for their accomplishments? After dinner, while the adults lingered over coffee and dessert, I volunteered to help with cleanup. Amelia initially protested. I was a guest, after all, but I insisted. I needed something to do with my hands while I processed the evening's subtle humiliations. I was loading the dishwasher when I noticed Amelia's recipe collection scattered across the kitchen counter. Not unusual, she'd clearly been cooking from multiple sources for the elaborate meal. But one of the notebooks was open to a page that made me stop dead in my tracks. It was a detailed meal plan for the past 3 months, written in Amelia's precise handwriting. Each week was carefully mapped out with specific dishes, cooking techniques, and what appeared to be teaching objectives. Week 8. Introduce proper knife skills during Sunday prep. Focus on julienne technique for vegetables. Week 10. Advanced sauce making, hollandaise, béarnaise. Build confidence with emulsification. Week 12. Bread making fundamentals. Importance of kneading technique and rise timing. I flipped back through the pages, my confusion growing with every entry. These weren't just meal plans, they were lesson plans. But teaching who? The answer hit me when I found the notes section at the back of the notebook. Justin responding well to video tutorials. Prefers written instructions to follow along. Shows natural aptitude for timing and temperature control. Confidence improving with practice. Still hesitant about seasoning. Needs encouragement to trust his palate. Caddy loves helping with prep work. Consider age-appropriate tasks for bonding activities. Justin. The lessons weren't for some imaginary student or cooking class Amelia might be planning. They were for my husband. My hands were shaking as I continued reading, pieces of a puzzle I hadn't even known existed suddenly clicking into place. I stood there in Amelia's kitchen, holding evidence that my husband had been taking secret cooking lessons from his mother for months, maybe longer. While I'd been struggling with self-doubt about my culinary abilities, Amelia had been systematically training Justin to cook the foods she thought our family should be eating, the foods I apparently wasn't capable of preparing properly. My mind started racing through recent memories, re-examining moments that had seemed innocent at the time, but now took on sinister new meaning. Justin's sudden interest in grocery shopping, always volunteering to pick up a few things on his way home from work, his new habit of arriving home early on certain days, claiming his meetings had been canceled or his workload was lighter than expected. How long had this been going on? How many evenings had Justin spent in this very kitchen, learning to prepare the foods his mother considered essential for a properly functioning household? Imagine the conversations that must have accompanied these lessons. Amelia's gentle guidance about proper techniques, probably mixed with understanding sighs about how some people just aren't naturally gifted in the kitchen. Justin's growing confidence as he mastered skills that his wife apparently lacked, coupled with increasing frustration about having to pretend he didn't know better. Why am I always the last one to know about the elaborate schemes happening in my own life? I heard footsteps approaching and quickly closed the notebook, my heart pounding like I'd been caught stealing. Amelia appeared in the doorway, carrying empty dessert plates and wearing that serene expression that meant she was pleased with how the evening had gone. "Oh, sweetheart, you don't need to clean up. You're a guest tonight." But I wasn't a guest. I was a student who'd been failing a class I didn't know I was enrolled in, while my husband took private tutoring sessions to compensate for my inadequacies. I mumbled something about wanting to help and continued loading dishes, my mind spinning with questions I couldn't ask without revealing what I discovered. How long had Amelia been planning this elaborate teaching project? Was this supposed to be temporary help until I improved? Or was Justin learning to cook because everyone had given up on my ability to feed the family properly? When we finally left, Justin spent the drive home praising his mother's cooking with the detailed appreciation of someone who understood exactly how much skill and effort had gone into the meal. I sat in the passenger seat, watching my husband reveal expertise he'd been hiding from me, and felt like everything I thought I knew about our relationship was collapsing in real time. Caddy chattered from her car seat about all the things Grandma had taught her about cooking, asking when we could make bread at home like Grandma did. She wanted to know why our cookies never tasted like Grandma's, and whether Daddy could learn to make the special sauce that made everything taste better. "Maybe Daddy already knows how to make those things," I said quietly, testing the waters. Justin glanced at me with what might have been panic in his eyes. I wouldn't know where to start with something that complicated, but his voice had that careful quality that meant he was choosing his words deliberately, and I realized he was lying. Not maliciously. Justin doesn't lie to hurt people. He was lying to protect me from the truth that everyone else apparently already knew. That night, after Caddy was asleep and Justin was in the shower, I went through our kitchen with new eyes, looking for evidence of the deception that had been happening right under my nose. I found it everywhere. The cookbook tucked behind the others on our shelf, one I'd never used but that had multiple bookmarks and notes in Justin's handwriting. The spice blends in our pantry that I didn't remember buying, organized in a way that suggested someone with actual knowledge of flavor profiles. The quality of knife cuts in our leftover vegetables, more precise than anything I'd ever achieved. I stood in my kitchen at midnight, surrounded by evidence of my own obsolescence, and realized that the war with Amelia was already over. I'd lost before I even knew we were fighting. Update. Original post, 6 weeks ago. Holy hell, you people had a lot to say. I didn't expect more than 47,000 upvotes and my inbox to explode with everything from marriage advice to detailed explanations of why I should divorce Justin immediately. I need to tell you what happened after that dinner party revelation. It was just the intermission before the real show began. 3 days later, I confronted them. Not because I planned it, I'm apparently too emotionally mature for dramatic timing, but because Justin made the mistake of fixing my scrambled eggs while he thought I wasn't paying attention. I walked into the kitchen to find him whisking something into my perfectly adequate eggs, transforming them into the kind of fluffy, restaurant-quality masterpiece that I'd been failing to achieve for 4 years of marriage. He looked up like a kid caught with his hand in the cookie jar, except the cookie jar was my entire sense of domestic competence. Why am I always the one who has to pretend not to notice when people are systematically undermining my confidence while trying to help me? I asked him point blank about the cooking lessons. Not accusingly. I've been managing other people's emotional comfort for so long that even my confrontations come with built-in cushioning. I just asked when he'd started learning to cook from his mother, and whether he planned to keep pretending he didn't know how to make anything more complicated than toast. Finally, Justin admitted that the lessons had started 18 months ago, right around the time Caddy began eating solid food and I was struggling with the transition from baby food to family meals. Amelia had noticed, because Amelia notices everything, that Caddy wasn't enthusiastic about my cooking. She'd suggested to Justin that maybe he could learn a few techniques to help make family dinners more appealing for our daughter. Just temporary assistance, she'd said. Just until I found my confidence in the kitchen. Just a way for Justin to support his family during a challenging transition period. Justin genuinely thought he was protecting me. He'd watched me struggle with self-doubt about my cooking abilities and decided the solution was to secretly become competent enough to compensate for my inadequacies, rather than addressing the fact that his mother was systematically destroying my confidence. Justin's defense was that he'd never meant for it to go on so long. The lessons were supposed to be short-term, just enough knowledge to help with Caddy's meals and maybe surprise me with an occasional nice dinner. But Amelia's curriculum was comprehensive, and Justin discovered he actually enjoyed cooking. What started as crisis management had evolved into a hobby that he genuinely loved but couldn't share with me because it would reveal the original deception. The conversation with Amelia happened the following weekend. Justin wanted to handle it himself, but I'd learned enough about family dynamics to know that letting him mediate between his mother and his wife was just another way of avoiding the real issue. I drove to Amelia's house on a Saturday morning, armed with nothing but exhaustion and a desperate need to understand what the hell had been happening in my own life. Amelia offered coffee, asked about Caddy, and settled into her living room with the patient expression of someone prepared to explain why all of this had been necessary. The explanation, when it came, was delivered with such perfect maternal concern that I almost forgot to be angry. Amelia had noticed that Justin seemed stressed about family meals. Caddy wasn't eating well. I appeared to be struggling with the transition to cooking for a family instead of just a couple, and Justin had mentioned feeling helpless to support me during what was clearly a difficult adjustment period. She'd offered to teach him a few basic techniques, just enough to help with Caddy's meals and maybe take some pressure off me during busy weeks. Nothing elaborate, just simple, child-friendly recipes that might make family dinners less stressful for everyone. The lessons had expanded organically, Amelia explained, because Justin showed real aptitude for cooking and seemed to enjoy having a skill that could benefit his family. She'd never intended to undermine my role as the family cook. She was just trying to give Justin tools to support me more effectively. It was all delivered with such reasonable concern that I felt insane for being upset about it. Amelia had identified a problem, offered a solution, and provided practical help that benefited everyone involved. But then Amelia said something that made everything crystallize into perfect, horrible clarity. She mentioned how much happier Justin seemed during their cooking sessions, how relaxed and confident he became when he was working with ingredients he understood, how important it was for men to be able to contribute meaningfully to household management, especially when their wives were struggling with certain domestic responsibilities. That's how Amelia characterized my entire existence as a cook and mother. I realized, sitting in Amelia's perfectly appointed living room while she explained how much she'd helped my family, that this had never been about cooking. When I pointed this out, Amelia looked genuinely hurt. She'd never intended to make me feel inadequate. She was just trying to help our family function more smoothly. If I'd felt criticized or undermined, that was an unfortunate misunderstanding of her purely supportive intentions. Misunderstanding. After 18 months of secret cooking lessons and subtle criticism of my domestic abilities, Amelia characterized my objections as a misunderstanding of her helpful nature. The conversation ended with Amelia expressing hope that we could move forward with better communication and mutual understanding. She suggested that maybe I could join the cooking lessons, turn them into a family activity that would bring everyone closer together. Justin had learned so much, and I might benefit from some structured guidance in developing my culinary skills. Structured guidance. From the woman who'd spent 2 years systematically undermining my confidence while secretly training my husband to replace me in the kitchen. Justin was waiting with Caddy when I got home, both of them looking like they expected me to either explode or dissolve into tears. Instead, I sat them both down and had the most honest conversation of my marriage. I told Justin that I understood his motives, but that his solution had been devastating to my confidence and our relationship. I explained to Caddy, in 4-year-old terms, that sometimes grown-ups make mistakes when they're trying to help each other, and that Daddy and I needed to figure out better ways to work together as a team. Then I told Justin that the secret cooking lessons were over, effective immediately. Not because I was threatened by his skills, I was genuinely proud of what he'd learned, but because our marriage couldn't survive any more well-intentioned deceptions designed to protect me from problems I deserved to know about. Amelia wasn't entirely wrong. I had been struggling with cooking for our family, and Justin's secret assistance had probably improved our lives in measurable ways. But the cost of that improvement, my confidence, our communication, my relationship with both Justin and Caddy, had been too high to justify the benefits. We're in counseling now, not because our marriage is falling apart, but because we need help building the kind of partnership that doesn't require elaborate deceptions to function properly. Justin is learning to communicate his concerns directly instead of finding workarounds that protect my feelings while solving problems behind my back. I'm learning to ask for help when I need it instead of struggling silently while everyone around me develops rescue strategies. Caddy is adjusting surprisingly well to the new family dynamic where Daddy cooks some meals and Mommy cooks others, and nobody pretends that one approach is inherently superior. She's also learning that families work best when everyone is honest about their strengths and challenges rather than maintaining elaborate performances to protect each other's feelings. Amelia and I have reached what our therapist generously calls an understanding. She continues to be a devoted grandmother and an excellent cook. I continue to be Justin's wife and Caddy's mother. We interact politely at family gatherings and avoid detailed discussions about domestic management techniques. It turns out that partnerships work better when both people are allowed to develop skills without secret tutoring sessions or elaborate protection schemes. Who would have thought that honesty might actually be more helpful than well-intentioned manipulation? I didn't sign up to be managed by people who thought I couldn't handle the truth about my own life, but apparently I'd been accepting that management for years without realizing it. Never again. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone is trust them enough to be honest about the problems you're all facing together, rather than creating elaborate solutions that require them to remain ignorant of their own circumstances. That's a lesson worth learning, even if it took 18 months of secret cooking classes to figure it out.